This very, very simple dress we refer to as our Jane Eyre dress. It's the sort of dress we imagine a governess wearing. It really is a thrifty dress. These sort of garments do not last very well, so we are very lucky to have one. They don't last very well because this is the sort of woman who, when she couldn't worn it anymore, would have sold it, passed it on, and ending up going to a ragman, because, as we keep saying, fabric is so expensive. But look at all the details here. None of the buttons match. She's using what she can find. This whole dress is stitched by hand. You've got the little gussets under the arms for movement. You go inside. She's still aware of fashion trends and things, and we got our little cartridge pleats. They're a lot smaller. You know, the other ones we've looked at were the depth of my finger. But this whole thing is stitched by hand. These seams are all hand done. This is way beyond, this is sort of round the turn when sewing machines are starting to come in, but just because it's arrived on the scene doesn't mean that everybody has access to it. We have a back shoulder seam, as you can see, it's down here. The art of these shoulder seams being so much lower meant that these women did not have bad posture. We have a little black ruffle here, which has been added at a later date. You can see the quality of the stitching is nothing compared to the rest of it. But it's just all of these pleats have been sewn by hand, and she's got the wool trim again. We have another dress, which is a normal person's dress. I'm sorry about this phrase. I can't think of a better one at the moment. We have got lovely detail of gathers on the sleeves, the big full arms, the details on the waist, making the optical illusion of a waist being smaller by drawing the eye down. But the interesting thing to me about this dress is, as I said, this lady has spent her money on the wool that is the outside of the dress, because the inside is made up of two very distinct types of fabric. We've got this one, which has almost like a dice pattern on, of which she had a fair amount, but not enough. She then starts patching pieces together. She's using everything she's got at home. And literally, there are seams everywhere. This is a woman who doesn't throw any scrap of fabric out, because fabric is very, very expensive. The main feature of this bodice is the fact that we actually have a maker's label on the waistband. The waistband, which we see here, that attaches with hooks and eyes, keeps this bodice firmly in place on our wearer. What's very interesting with these makers' labels is they first are utilised by Charles Frederick Worth in Paris, who is the Englishman who founded the French haute couture industry. This is a beautiful bodice, and it's got some really important features going on here. One, we've got the waistband that we talked about earlier in the first dress, which doesn't have a maker's name on, but the attention to detail, and that's what I find fascinating with these. We're anchoring in our boning and our waistband, and it's done beautifully with these strong, practical yet elegant stitches. We also, when you go up inside the dress, we've got proper dress shields this time, which are American, this one. And these are the things which could have been replaceable. This is implying that this dress would have probably just had a corset cover underneath it rather than a sleeved chemise. This is what would have been taken out and washed, so you didn't have to wash your dress. And they were certainly used into the mid-1900s. This dress bodice also has a curved sleeve. And if we look over here, the shoulder seam is behind where today's shoulder seam would sit. It's a very elegant dress. You can also see as well, another nice feature is the curves, which help emphasize the waist so that it's no excess fabric where the waistline is being pulled in tight. Beautiful. This dress, when you look at it for a starter, is dramatic. This is when we got the long line, princess line seams going all the way down the front. It's very dramatic. It does have horizontal darts, which we don't see today. It does have beautiful detailing of the piping that we see a lot round shoulder lines. There's the horizontal dart on the inside. But the reason I've included this in the exhibition is because it's actually not very well made. I wanted to show that these historical dresses, not all of them were made by incredibly impressive seamstresses. It's little things like you've got these kilt pleats, but you can see the top of them through here. The folds of these biases going around these crenelations don't really work. The edges, when you're going down here, when you start looking at this dress in detail, it actually is quite amateurish compared to some of the garments that we have looked at and got on display. So this is an example of a not very well made dress. We have another silk dress that belonged to a normal lady, because once again she's splashed out on this stunning shot silk. For anybody who is not aware, shot silk is where the warp and the weft are different colours so that the colour moves and changes as you move it in the light. It's still a very popular fabric type for today. You have got the concertina pleats all running around the back again, but it is the bodice lining that I'm interested in. Look how thrifty this lady has been. She's had this piece of cotton which she's used to line, but she's mended it all. She's darned it. She's put the patch in place here. Also at the front on both sides, you see these seams have been added in. This one's got a little hole right here. These seams are not in the same place, so this is done. This seam is not in the same place as this seam. This has been done before the dress was made, so she's utilised every single piece of this cotton to make the lining fabric, which is very similar to the Japanese art of Sashiko. It might be the colours that's reminding me of it, but it's certainly the visible stitching. She's trying to make this just work. She knows that nobody is really going to see the interior of this dress. It needs to be strong, it needs to work, it needs to be supported. And that to me just reminds me of that ethos of the Japanese repairs, that you want this fabric to last and carry on. There are patches everywhere. It's quite beautiful. This dress is also all hand stitched. And can you hear the noise the silk makes? It's very beautiful. Sadly, there was a fashion well, big time, that these silks, because this noise was so desirable, that the silk got treated with certain chemicals. And so that actually is why when we still see shattered silk today, when the silk is just crumbling and falling to pieces, it's because of that chemical reaction of the wash that was put on. And it was put on cheaper silk to make it feel heavier, which gave that rustling sound. This silk is in very good condition. I do not think it happened there. Just a pointer while we're here, there's another ghost seam going on here. So she obviously made it when she was a bit smaller, and then had to make it a bit larger. And we have a patch under the arm there. And another one there. Another beautiful example of shop silk. This is a really interesting one. The detailing on the sleeves, once again, these are pagoda sleeves, but they are lined, but they would have had a sleeve coming out the bottom, a bell-shaped sleeve. And you've got this beautiful detailing on the front. Now, what is brilliant with this top, which is why I've included it, is it's damaged. These gathers have all come undone, so we can look inside. And you can see that once again, because of the fragility of this silk, this garment does up on the inside, and then they would have had pins just holding the silk together here. But you can see the boning, you can see the hand stitching going on down here. You can see just how much fabric is put into the gathering that we see over here. And we open it up. We have dress shields. We have large seam allowances because fabric is expensive and you might want to reuse. And we've got mending. And we have a lovely noise. This is a beautiful Victorian evening bodice. I don't know about you, but to me it looks quite angry. I think it's these really accentuated points. Look at that. Isn't that stunning? You can see these bones that go up and curve round here. And we've got boning here. And then it's almost built like a corset. When we go onto the inside, you've got little hooks and eyes which are attached to the skirt. You've got these very beautiful, but actually looking at it now, wonky horizontal darts. And this would have been laced up the back. But all of these little eyelets are hand bound. They're all hand bound. You could not get a sewing machine or anything to do it that tiny. So this, she would have been laced into this. But isn't it beautiful? Look at the fantail on this little bodice. She's shaking her tail feathers in this one. This is a beautiful, beautiful silk. It's so fine. I'm just going to flip it over, because then when you look inside it, look at that blue glazed cotton on the back of the fantail. This bodice has been machine stitched but hand finished, but it also has this little internal bodice. Because our silk is so fine, as we just saw, on the sleeves. The force of holding it all together is taken by this cotton inner jacket, so that there is not as much pressure on the lined silk outside. But isn't that beautiful? And there's more of a glazed cotton around the top, which is such a stunning colour. Those of you who know me and my obsession with blue will not be surprised that this is one of my favourites. This is a very good example of a Victorian bodice which would have gone with a crinoline skirt. Now, what's really interesting with this is we all have this idea that Victorian women were tiny and their waists were tiny. And yes, this is a very small bodice. But the reason I'm mentioning this is there's a very interesting fact. Not all women were tiny, just like not all women today are tiny. They use the art of optical illusion. If you got a massive skirt and huge shoulders, your waist by default will look smaller. And that's what they're playing with here. But once again, this is a silk bodice. It's got beautiful detailing running down the front. This is an expensive bodice, but we got a thrifty lady. She's done repairs. The lining is a very basic cotton. This is all hand stitched. But what I think is interesting is we can see inside this sleeve, you can see how the seams go from back to front. So they're twisting, which gives more body to the sleeve. And when we turn it out, you can see the detailing on the inside and the volume of fabric there too, and how they've held all of the pieces in place. This little tie would have pulled it up at the top, so you get even more puff for your money. Beautiful bodice here. What's very interesting with this are these sleeves, because these sleeves are unlined and have got a French seam, which is where the raw edges are inside the seam. This is more commonly seen in Victorian underwear, and the reason that this is as it is because you would have had a bell-shaped cotton undersleeve, which might only have finished at your elbow, which came out underneath it. So this would have almost had a lining because it wouldn't have been touching the skin, because when we look inside there is a little lining round just above the elbow. When we look inside this bodice as well, we've got these horizontal darts, which we just don't use these days, but it emphasizes the waist. And we have this from when it was obviously in an exhibition probably 100 years ago. Isn't that beautiful? But it is in very good condition, but we do have quite a lot of staining under the arms. Leg of mutton sleeves, which are very, very of their period. We also have these buttons, which are a very good example, which we've seen on quite a few of these dresses, but they have no shank. They are sewn from the fabric, which has been wrapped round a wooden ball directly onto the fabric. Then inside we've got these fabulous fantails, again, which we see quite regularly covering the bustles. This is machine stitched, but it's hand finished. There are ghost seams here. There are horizontal seams, and this fringe was added at a later date. It is not of its era, as you can see from the badly stitched attachments, probably for use in theatre or something like that. Here we have got another, but a better example of a hidden bustle. Inside this skirt, we have got this ring of baleen, which is what we call whalebone, but is actually their filter teeth, same as would have been used in corsets, because it's stiff but it's bendy, and it's held with the ties here to give extra body to the bustle that we've just been talking about, which is obviously at the back of a dress. You have cartridge pleats, but you also have these big luscious folds of fabric. They're left open and empty here because the bodice has a fantail that sits over the top of this, and so this is all hidden. There are two other features of this beautiful skirt. We got this front panel of, I'm assuming, silk velvet. But at the top, there is this small piece that's been inserted. Now, it's been very roughly done compared to the quality of the sewing in the rest of this skirt. So my guess is that actually this was inserted for the early stages of pregnancy, because you'd still have worn a corset during your pregnancy. So your bump is a lot lower than we would associate it being today. And for those early stages, this little bit here would have given our wearer a little bit more flexibility. That is, I guess, a hypothesis, but that's the only reason I can think of for inserting this piece. The other piece I want to mention is at the bottom. This is an invention which is of its time. It is kilt pleating, and these, I call them dust catchers, because we've also got the wool that we talked about in an earlier dress. But once again, this is the piece of fabric which touches the road, touches the dirt. The silk of the skirt doesn't go anywhere near it. This is a piece that can easily be, well, fairly easily, be removed, replaced, washed, or just thrown away. This is the bodice that goes with the skirt we've just been looking at. And apart from this beautiful smocking on the front, you can also see in here that we have follow-up to my theory that the skirt was altered for a pregnancy, because the sides of the bodice have been expanded as well, which I think reiterates that. Another interesting point in this bodice is the use of the selvage edge to keep things neat and tidy and save having to neaten the edges. And then we've got our waist tie, but if we take it over to the back, there you can see the fantail which we were talking about, which would have covered the top of those pleats on the bustle. I love this. This is a precursor to what we all know of as the Victorian silhouette, the crinoline, because this amazing petticoat, which is corded, which gives it fullness, has also huge, chunky cartridge pleats all the way around. They are so thick and strong up here, and the fabric is thick and strong because it is made of horsehair, and the French for horsehair is crin, and that is where the word crinoline comes from, which I just think is amazing. You can see down here where the cord has worn through its casing, and the other bit of this garment I love is here. This is the flat cotton, which we can see would have been resting against the wearer's corset, because you had like little studs on the corset which hooked it up at the front, and they were metal and they've worn through the cotton. We do have one slight mystery on this garment. As you can see, there is a moire effect. Now, a moire effect, this sort of, we think of moiré silk today, is where you're pushing the fabric through embossed steel rollers, and this pattern sort of gets imprinted into the fibres. And it's understandable on why you do it for silk. It gives a beautiful, luscious effect. But why would you do it on horsehair for something which barely anybody else would see? I have absolutely no idea, but I love it. Beautiful, beautiful dress. More of an everyday dress belonging to a normal person. Now, this is stunning shot silk again. And it's been lined with glazed cotton on the bodice. Now, we know this is a normal person's dress because she obviously doesn't have an excessive budget. She has splashed out on this silk because we can see the lining is a very basic cotton. But look at the amount of fabric that is in this. Look at these box pleats. They are massive. Each one has got 3 pleats on each side, big pleats, and they go all the way around. Sadly, somebody has attacked this with a pair of scissors later on in its life. We can see a barline corset, a boning piece coming out here, and a tiny little pocket for a watch, a pocket watch. Very, very practical. But even though it is a very, very simple fabric, I do love glazed cotton. Interestingly, this dress has also been shortened. Look at the size of this hem. I suspect this is also at the time when somebody did some vandalism to it. And you can see there the wool trim has just been tacked up. And you can see the wear on silk when the wool trim is in the wrong place. Silk is a fragile fabric, wool is strong. She's got beautiful, massive sleeves and very interesting way the seam works here, which to our modern eye doesn't seem hugely practical to have all of this silk gathered under here. It's a very different way of cutting fabric. Also, there is an interesting point here. I think that we have the hooks and eyes that we normally know of, and hooks and eyes have been around for a long time, but here they're using the hook with a little round hole, and the buttons are for decoration only. For this exhibition, it will be the inside of the skirt that we are looking at. You can see here as well how massive these pleats are. The amount of fabric that has been cinched in at this waist.